Welcome to this new automotive news video for Thursday, April 16th, 2026. And today we're going to talk about Dacia, which wants to save combustion engines by unveiling a new version of its Duster, equipped with next-generation all-combustion engines that can consume less fuel than hybrid vehicles. We'll also talk about another big news story that broke this morning. Stellantis has officially announced it will stop car production at its Poissy plant. Unfortunately, this is yet another blow to the French automotive industry. We'll also talk about Renault, which is unveiling a new version of its Renault 4 electric car, a version with less range but a higher price. And finally, we'll discuss Chery, which is launching a new model in Europe. And as usual with Chinese brands, prices remain especially low. These are the topics of this video from April 16, 2026. I hope you'll find them as interesting as I did. If that's the case, don't hesitate to show your support for my channel for free. You can do that by leaving a like on this video, subscribing for future ones, boosting this one if the option appears for you, and of course, leaving a comment. You can share your thoughts on today's news. Today, we'll discuss combustion engines and a new innovation from Dacia. It's true it may seem surprising, since it's not the first brand people think of when people talk about engine makers. And yet it's true. Dacia is working on a new technological solution that could save or at least extend the life of combustion engines by addressing two of their main problems. On one hand, fuel consumption, and on the other, CO2 emissions. In fact, for several months now, Dacia has been working on a special version of the Renault Duster, equipped with a rather unique engine. On this version, Dacia has put the H12 engine from Horses under the hood. So just a quick reminder for those who have never heard of Horses. It's an engine manufacturing company really specialized in the design and development of combustion engines, co-created by Renault, which owns Dacia, as well as by the Chinese group Geely. Together, through Horses, they developed a new engine, the 1.2-liter turbocharged three-cylinder gasoline engine called H12. Not to be confused with the HR12, which is also found under the hoods of some Renault cars, but has nothing to do with the engine we're talking about here. Here, we're talking about an engine with a very high compression ratio, raised to 17:1, which means that in the engine's cylinders, the air-fuel mixture is compressed 17 times before the combustion phase. That's much higher than in most modern gasoline cars, making it a real technical achievement. If it's not managed properly, it can cause what's called pre-ignition, which can eventually damage the engine's moving parts, and that's not a good thing. For that, there's a specific ignition system that was custom designed for the H12 engine. Those innovations are now joined by a new variable geometry turbo system, and above all, a new system based on the EGR valves used in diesel engines. But here, in an updated version, tailored for a small gasoline engine like this one. All of these are small inventions, new systems that help optimize this engine's fuel consumption and bring it below 4 liters per 100 kilometers. And that's exactly where it gets interesting, because we're used to seeing manufacturers regularly promoting so-called revolutionary new engines that claim to have particularly low fuel consumption. On paper, it looks great, but it's rare for manufacturers to achieve similar values when actually driving the vehicle. And that's what Dacia has done with this Duster, which is actually the first vehicle where this engine has really been installed for this kind of test. On this H12 version of the Duster, Dacia claims a measured average fuel consumption of 3.3 liters per 100 kilometers. So, of course, we can imagine that during these test phases, the driver was particularly gentle on the accelerator, and that we're not talking about sporty driving here. Still, 3.3 liters per 100 kilometers is well below the current average. And it's very close to, or even better than, some plug-in hybrid vehicles, which, however, in their certification tests, have parts where they drive entirely in 100% electric mode, which drastically lowers their average. And here, when it comes to our Duster, we're talking about a pure internal combustion engine. There's no hybrid system at all. It's truly a record for fuel consumption. So here, 4.3 liters per 100 kilometers, and knowing that there's another interesting thing about this Duster, it doesn't use regular fuel. So indeed, the H12 is an engine that was designed to run on gasoline, ethanol, methanol, a whole range of different fuels, including the fuel used for this test, which is Nexa 95. It's a custom fuel that was developed by Repsol. For those who don't know, Repsol is kind of like the equivalent of Total Energy, but in Spain. This fuel is a renewable fuel made from organic residues, and it's already actually available in Spain. It's true that in France you don't see it at all, but there are already several dozen gas stations that offer this Nexa 95 fuel. And indeed, by using this fuel, not only does the Duster consume very little, but on top of that, it's considered to have a neutral impact on the environment, since it's 0 grams of CO2. At least on paper, since like most synthetic fuels, it's also made by absorbing some of the CO2 from the air, which is why it's considered low carbon, or even carbon neutral. According to Dacia, between the very low consumption and the use of Nexa 95 that would make it possible. For a vehicle like this one, which would travel 12,500 km per year, that's about the average in France, it would save about 1.7 tons of CO2 emissions every year. For now, Dacia doesn't really have any plans to produce a Duster with this engine specifically to run on this fuel. The aim of this move is rather to prove that there are other solutions besides 100% electric to fully, or almost fully, decarbonize the transport sector, and thus meet the targets set by the European Commission. Since in fact, and that's really the icing on the cake, Nexa 95 is compatible with any traditional gasoline engine. Using it here on the Duster is simply an opportunity to highlight this engine, which consumes very little. But in reality, we could decarbonize a large part of road transport simply by switching from a traditional fossil fuel to a renewable fuel like this one. And that's a card that many industrial players, including many governments like Germany's, want to play right now. Finding other alternatives that allow us to keep the advantages of the combustion engine while saving fuel and reducing CO2 emissions. We're going to talk about the other big automotive news of the day since it's official. Stellantis is going to stop car production at its Poissy plant in France. And with this decision, it's the closure of the very last car manufacturing plant in the Île-de-France region. Currently, the French automotive industry is concentrated in northern France and slightly in the east. Elsewhere, there's nothing left. So for some people, this announcement wasn't a surprise, since there had been big doubts for a while about the survival of the Poissy plant. There was no production plan for after 2028. After that, and so after the end of production of the Opel Mokka and DS3, which are currently being produced, the plant will change its role a little bit. It will no longer make new cars, but that won't really improve things, since Stellantis wants to convert this Poissy plant into a spare parts production plant for after-sales service, but also into a vehicle reconditioning plant to refurbish, more or less, used cars and then resell them in the group's various dealerships. Stellantis stated there will be no layoffs in principle, but staff will still decrease over time, with the plant shrinking from 1,700 employees now to 1,000 by 2030. So this will happen through retirements, voluntary departures, or possibly reassignments to other plants in the group. In recent months, the Poissy plant was operating at only 60% of its maximum production capacity. This was mainly due to the fact that Stellantis made a strategic mistake with this plant by assigning it only two models, the DS3 and the Opel Mokka, which are somewhat niche models that don't sell very well. This had already caused shutdowns in the past because, for example, in October 2025, due to a lack of sales and therefore a lack of orders, the plant was completely shut down for about 2 weeks. On the Renault side, they're starting to talk a bit about the Plein Sud version of the Renault 4, which was previewed by the Roland Garros concept, unveiled to the press yesterday. This Roland Garros is simply the Plein Sud version, though it hasn't been named as such yet. The big difference between this Renault 4 and the traditional Renault 4 is that its roof is replaced by a fabric roof, which is supposed to give it a bit of a vacation feel, a bit of a convertible vibe. Since this fabric roof can open up to 92 cm long and 80 cm wide. By the way, the roof can be opened with a remote control, but it can also be opened by voice command. This new open-top version is considered the high-end version of the electric Renault 4 with a slightly more powerful engine. We're talking about 150 horsepower here, with the 52 kW battery. The entry-level model should be around 37,000 euros, which is still 7,000 euros more than the basic Renault 4, even though it has less range. That's what's actually pretty funny. It's a car that's supposed to inspire vacations, but in the end, it offers a range that's 20 to 30 kilometers less than the base versions, with only 390 kilometers in the WLTP cycle. That's mainly because, with its fabric roof, it has worse aerodynamics, but also because it's heavier than the base versions. Since it doesn't have a hard roof, to make the body more rigid, they have to reinforce it from underneath. In general, that makes cars a bit heavier. We'll see if it sells well, just like the vehicle we're going to talk about now, the LePass L6. It's a new SUV that will be distributed in Europe by the Chinese group Chery. We're talking about a C-segment SUV here, which means it's medium-sized, about 4.62 meters long. So obviously, there will be a 100% electric version, which will have a 67 kW battery and offer up to 435 kilometers of range, with fast charging that allows you to go from 30% to 80% charge in about 20 minutes. But there will also be a hybrid version, a plug-in version, actually a super hybrid, based on a 1.5-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder gasoline engine, which is combined with an electric system that can work both as a plug-in hybrid and as an electric vehicle with a range extender. All that in a single vehicle. The announced combined range from the battery and combustion engine is 1,100 kilometers, And the prices, even though they are not yet final for the French market, should be around 32 to 33,000 euros. At the entry level, that means still a few thousand euros cheaper than its main European competitors, like the Peugeot 3008, for example. So right now, there's really a flood of new Chinese brands and models in Europe. The European market will determine what sells, and in 4 to 5 years, we'll know our position. That's all for this news roundup. I hope you enjoyed the video. If that's the case, as usual, don't hesitate to show it by leaving a like and subscribing. And of course, also by supporting us through the join button below this video. We'll see you tomorrow for the next one.